Hi, I'm a retired parole officer, and I wanted to tell you factually what should be occurring to the January 6th people that have been withheld, some without even any notification of charges, which is not right. There is no paperwork that needs to be done on someone whose charges are dismissed. They get a get out of jail free card. You have no right to hold them till anything's processed. You can process all of that after they're gone. You have no right to hold them. You have no hold on them. You have no legal authority. As soon as the charges are dismissed or they are pardoned, they must be let go. Open the door, let them out, give them the property back, way bye. The only time that they need to be held for paperwork is if they're being released on supervision, on parole, probation, determinate release, or any kind of federal supervision. And then you have to have an institutional parole officer serve the paperwork. This is just institutional parole officer has to give it to sentence management, who has to process and basically dock the time against their sentence. And then they calculate the supervision, the time left, blah, 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 and the release date. You get that and serve it to them, and then they're released on that date. That's the only time anyone's held for processing, is when they have further supervision or further monitoring to do. So January 6ers, when pardoned, should be able to basically come out of their cells, get their property, change their clothes, and leave. It's just factually how the prison system works. It doesn't matter if it's local, state, or federal charges. That's how it works. I used to be an institutional parole officer. I used to supervise murders. I used to help with lie detectors for the S offenders, and I used to do interstate compact. So legally, they have no right to hold them. They should have been released the moment the pardon was filed. I mean, do your own research. But I worked in corrections for a long time, and that's kind of how it should be going. It's kind of disconcerting if you're a law-abiding American or you're someone who's being held without charges being given to you, without notification of your charges being pressed against you, or without proper court. Like some of them have been there for 3 years with no arraignment yet. You can't do that. If I had done that, or any other judge had done that, there would have been a lot of lawsuits filed. So this is something where everyone's allowed to have a speedy trial. Everybody has the right to a speedy trial, and they have been encumbered and burdened with someone else's nonsense, and their justice system has defaulted on them because it's too scared to buck the people in power. That's just how I see it from working in corrections and knowing legally they can't hold them once a pardon paperwork has been filed. The moment it is on file, it becomes rule, and the charges are dismissed. Therefore, you have no right to hold them. You have no paperwork that needs to be done to them. They may sign out a booking sheet or sign out a property slip, but that's about it. And nothing has to be done. The only time they have to be held for paperwork is if they're going to be released onto some level of supervision or extradited, all that jazz. Otherwise, sentence management doesn't have to calculate anything, and IPO does not have to make them sign anything, and they should be ready to walk out the door. Things you learn when you work in the corrections agency for a long, long time. If you just read state and federal law, you would understand that there's been a lot of infractions legally, especially those that have been held without notification of charges, those have been held without arraignment for 3 years, those have been held without attorney privileges. Oh my gosh. And I think they're trying to do cleanup so that perhaps they can't backlash and sue. I think they're trying to do cleanup or do a little bit more bullying so people won't maybe go after litigation. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is just try to say we still have some level of power, but actually they don't. When people have to supersede the rules and law, that just means they're a bully and they have no power. Therefore, they're trying to fictionally create power so that you feel scared of them. There's no power there. And as a parole officer, I never tried to elicit power I did not have. I wanted to see everyone do well, become a productive member of society, and never go back to prison. Did that always happen? No, it did not. But that was my genuine wish for everyone that I supervised. And I worked really hard to help people make good decisions and learn how to make good decisions and get out of the track that they were in that kept putting them in the ditch line of life. It's just scary. It's scary to see when I know the legal parameters, because I used to be institutional parole officer of a jail, and I used to know every comings and goings of the jail. There were so many people that the DA would hold for the 3 days as long as they could, and then decide the charges weren't strong enough to let them go. As soon as they're dismissed, you have to let them go. You have no reason to hold them. You have no paperwork they need to sign except they maybe got a release slip or a property slip. That's about it. So they might sign that they're leaving at X hour, X minute, or they might sign for the property back. That's it. That's the only reason that they would have to sign anything. And that can be done. I mean, that you have those on file in hundreds, in your drawer. That's not anything you have to generate specifically for them. You just fill in the blanks. No one is being released on supervision. I know he's reviewing some people that did harm to the building or took actions that were against the law. He's allowing them to stay and going to review their charges, and they probably will end up with a charge, which they should. But those that are being released are those that he feels should not have been taken in any way, shape, or form. It's unnerving because I saw bad officers forget to do paperwork and cost people 60 to 90 days of their life because they weren't paying attention to paperwork and sentence management. They weren't filing all the paperwork. They weren't signing all the paperwork that needed to be signed at the jail level. And it really irritated me. And I fought to never hold anyone over their direct amount of time and to get them out and be prepped and ready 30 days before the release. So they have all their paperwork done and they're aware, and we can set up a plan for how they're going to go back out and handle life, to not end back up in the jail. So to see somebody hold people without due cause, or to lie about paperwork that needs to be done, or to say these things have to be done and not explain themselves, not give the public any explanation whatsoever, that is a little bit scary. That means that legally we all should be concerned. That means that our rule of law and our laws on the book are only as good as the people and their hearts that choose to enforce them. So what should you do if you have a loved one's being held in jail, they're incarcerated, they're serving a sentence? Number one, you should go to the jail, have a meeting with them. You'll have to send the paperwork through the jail administration staff, have them handwrite a statement that says you can collect all of their information per their docket or dockets that they're being incarcerated upon. You take that to the circuit court clerk, and you get a copy of all of the paperwork in their dockets. You want to specifically look for judgment orders. Look at the judgment orders. If you can't understand them, because they will say for how long they're being incarcerated, what their sentence is, how long they're being incarcerated, any release supervision. If you can't understand that, take it back to the circuit court clerk. Ask them to explain. If you still can't get an answer that you're okay with, then you should probably call sentence management. Sentence management is in every state with the Department of Corrections, and they can answer any question you have about each docket for each offender. You will need their docket number or numbers and their state identification number. In Tennessee, it's called a TOMAS number. You can also do things on the fly, like a felony offender identification lookup, a FOIL search in your state. That will have the dockets they're being incarcerated upon, which area they're being incarcerated, which prison, their estimated release date, all of that jazz. And it's all public information. Beyond that, you can do a Vine link sometimes, and you can register to stay with the person. If they're ever moved, it will show you where they move, and it has some information on it. I prefer a FOIL search because I think it gives you more direct answers. These things happen. You can talk to the institutional parole officer, who will be someone who works for the Department of Corrections that is stationed at that justice system or a probation parole office near that jail where they can fulfill paperwork for sentence management. They will also be able to help you, though sometimes it is hard, and I hate to say this, to get someone who is a government employee to help you. I know they're busy and overworked. I sometimes had 400 plus offenders to deal with when you're supposed to have 60 to 90. But you should always want to have good relationships with the public because you need their help when you're supervising offenders, and you just want to have a good rapport with your public. The community is the most important thing to someone who is on supervision. It just is. So those are some quick ways to get information on your loved ones. Obviously, if they're going to be extradited or they have interstate compact where they're going to another state, it's going to put a horseshoe in the scenario to where you're going to have to follow them across state lines and chase dockets and chase paperwork. It's a pain in the butt, but it can be done. And when they're assigned an interstate compact officer, that officer will actually be able to funnel all the paperwork and have all that ready. So if you have a signed note from the individual, they can give you copies of the information. The IPO or the interstate compact officer should also go to the jail to meet with the offender to discuss the release date, the time they're looking at, and any release options they have. Sometimes it doesn't happen in a timely fashion, and I hate to say that. You have to be your loved one's best advocate in these scenarios. So yeah, that's what I would recommend you do if you have a loved one that's currently incarcerated. Um, it's a shame, in my opinion, to see our justice system be used in this manner. And I had to pop on here, even though I'm in between one of two steps of a hair color. I had to pop on here and just tell some of the details so that people would have the information they needed to know. But please become very aware of the annotated code in your state, know the laws, know how they're applied, understand your police force, understand the charges they normally gravitate toward. Um, Go sit in a criminal or misdemeanor court date and understand who's routinely in trouble and what's going on in your area. You will see problems that you did not know existed, and it's a good eye opener for many people. These things are not pleasant to deal with, and it's very hard to advocate for someone who's in custody because there's so many people that have a hand in that pie if they have any kind of supervision. So if they're going to come out on supervision after being held, there's so many people that have paperwork and stuff to do. But in the case of the January 6 people that are being held that have their charges been dismissed and paroled, there's no paperwork to sign unless they sign that I was released at this hour, this minute, to prove they were released, and then assign a property slip so they can get their property and leave. There is no legal due course to hold them any longer. And so them not being released well over 24 hours after, we're on 48 hours on my time, well over 48 hours after a parole has been issued, it's not a good look for America, y'all. It's just not. And this is my opinion, but I'm deriving it from factual occurrences and my career in corrections. And I hope that you all look in depth at what's going on in your area and understand how to advocate for somebody that's in custody if they have issues like this. If you take away the law and you take away the language, every society will fall.